Lynn are talking about starting a class again on shame. Uh, Shame to me is the number one spirit killer. Um, and we are such a shame-based nation. I used to say in my lectures that the modern Pharaoh is not a political leader, but is the phrase, what will people think if? Uh, and we've all been taught that there's an external judge that's constantly evaluating our performance, which we internalize and don't even know how often we're limiting our behavior by this internal critic. So there's a book that I love that's called Soul Without Shame, and we may do it on Sunday evenings if I could talk Linnell into it. But anyhow, this is a poem from Dana Falls, her book of poetry called One Soul. She says, release the harsh and pointed inner voice. It's just a throwback to the past, and it holds no truth about this moment. Let go of self-judgment, the old learned ways of beating yourself up for each imagined inadequacy. Allow the dialogue within the mind to grow friendlier and quiet. Shift out of the inner criticism, and life suddenly looks very different. I can say this only because I make the choice 100 times a day to release the voice that refuses to acknowledge the real me. I want to say that again. I make the choice 100 times a day to release the voice that refuses to acknowledge the real me. And that's what's needed here isn't more prodding towards perfection, but intimacy, seeing clearly, embracing what I see. Love, not judgment, sows the seeds of tranquility and change. Love, not judgment, sows the seeds of tranquility and change. So that's the path that we're on. We've been taught change through force, through coercion, through judgment. And that's never a healthy change. That's always ego. That always leads to more constriction. So all these shaming voices that we hear all day long and respond to, thinking that it's reality and not even hearing them because they're so habitual, is what compresses us and keeps us locked in a box. I call it like a dog with a shock collar, that as a puppy, they put up the perimeter, they put on the shock collar. Every time you approach it, you get a shock. Well, then they take down the perimeter and you're still not going to approach that fence line because your neural pathways tell you that there's going to be pain if you approach that barrier. So today I wanted to talk about weirdness. And what is weirdness?
That was a good segue.
Okay, here we go. I gotta get my page. So weirdness is your brain's response to not having new neural pathways. And it's a primary indicator that you're genuinely breaking into new territory. The problem with it is that it comes with a negative pushback. So if you think about what weirdness is with our ancestors that lived out in the forest and moved in tribal groups, you develop neural pathways about what was safe to eat, about what parts it was safe to go in, who were the safe people to be around. And when you came upon something that your brain didn't recognize, a fruit that it didn't recognize, or an animal that it didn't recognize, or a person that didn't recognize, there was a feeling of weirdness, and we can now map the areas of the brain where this happens. Now, the more that weirdness is associated with your amygdala, again, I keep telling you, the amygdala is the part, puts the spin in it, that's the fear center, that's what activates the fight or flight mechanism. If it's something that you also associate with a fearful event in the past, you'll have a major pushback to it. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. How many of you in your meditation have your foot or some part of your body fall asleep? Okay. How much distress does that cause you to the point that it interrupts your meditation? And how many fear-based messages start going? Like mine is always, oh my God, I'm going to lose all sensation in my foot. I'm never going to be able to walk again. Or if we're in the Zendo, what we do is after we meditate, we all stand up and then we walk out of the hall. Well, half the time I can't even feel my foot and I'm going to trip. So immediately this sensation, which is unusual in my leg for it to be numb, cascades into a whole storyline, which ends up with a catastrophe, all right? Now, what has this got to do with our daily interactions? Do you all know the term xenophobia? That's the fear of anybody who's different from me, the fear of strangers. We had a wonderful woman come up that teaches about race relations. She came up from Houston. And the thing that I liked about her is that she didn't talk about race once. What she did talk about was weirdness and shame. And when it came to weirdness, what she asked us to do is cross your hands like this, interlace your fingers. Can you see what I'm doing? I want you to physically do this. All right. Now, shift everything over one finger, put the other thumb on the outside, and just sit in and see, how does that feel? How does your body respond to those sensations? Now, for very sensitive people, that can really feel uncomfortable enough that they can't stand to keep their hands in that position. But the longer you go, the weirder it feels to have your hands this way. That's all that weirdness is, because you're so used to doing things like this, folding your hands like this, that the other way is uncomfortable. All the time in yoga, Leo will tell people now, use the opposite foot that you normally put forward. All of a sudden, your body can't do it. And because it can't do it, what do you start feeling?
Weird.
You start feeling weird, and then you start feeling
Unsure.
unsure. So there's a song that I love by Randy Newman on one of his first albums. Some of you remember it. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't seem to be getting what everyone's getting. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Sometimes I get off a good one. No, I think it is. No, I know it is. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Those kind of things start, a self-doubt will begin to creep in. When we begin to perceive difference, it's so hard for our minds to settle into our own experience, not compare ourselves to what other people are doing, not to have this moment be controlled by unconscious neural pathways that feel comfortable and that we keep drifting back to, but actually stay in those sensations of discomfort and weirdness. So when you sit, hopefully you're going to have weird things come up. You're going to have weird emotions come up, weird thoughts come up, weird sensations come up in your body. And this is an excellent time for us to simply sit with those, to realize that weirdness does not mean that we are in danger. That's the thing that we have to break, that the things that we're comfortable with, we need to be comfortable with uncertainty. I feel vulnerable right now. When I first started feeling vulnerable, I told my therapist, I said, oh man, I'm starting to feel vulnerable like it was a bad thing. And she said, no, that's great. Vulnerability is a good feeling, means you're open, but I feel like I'm in danger, okay? Watch how that element gets added into it. That's the amygdala. And so the more we can remind ourselves, that's why we practice here quietly in our own self, dealing with this, is that we begin to wait out that signal and realize I'm still safe. Tommy used to like a phrase that we got from Tara Brach in one of her meditations, I can too stand this. I don't have to act on it. I can become comfortable with this discomfort. And it seems strange to talk about meditation as becoming comfortable with uncertainty or dealing with the unknown, dealing with what's weird and strange, but that's exactly the discipline we're undergoing, is As Pema Chodron says, we'll talk about this next week, when we hit something strange and we're caught off guard, there's a tendency for us to do this, to get small. And what meditation invites us to do is to do a counterintuitive response, which is to get bigger, okay? To step outside this experience, to give it space to expand. And the more it expands, the more it dilutes and the more tolerable it becomes.
Which is an interesting sort of way to think about protection, because you think of protecting as going small and
Right.
and
Constricting.
closing, but really protection can be opening and, like you said, distilling the salt or whatever it is, life, whatever comes your way, is a form of protection.
Right. So again, the link between martial arts and meditation is that in martial arts, when you're in a situation which provokes fear and that you've never been in before, you practice meditation so you can become comfortable with that uncomfortableness, because in the uncomfortable, but in that expanded part of your mind, you begin to see opportunities. So when I constrict, when I get in the fear-based part, all I can see is the threat and I lose the opportunities. So the safety is in the opportunity. Let's give one more, since we've got an aging population on the screen. How many of you, when you get a pain, immediately constrict and start going, oh, that was weird, I wonder what that means, and then go into a focusing on that particular area and a constriction, which totally stops the healing process, okay? So one of the things we do in meditation and healing is to invite you to expand the space around the discomfort, to let the pain float. Don't even call it pain, call it pressure or sharpness or whatever other word comes to mind, because pain automatically triggers a constricting response. That's why we have to be careful with our language. So, this is why that curiosity is so essential, that we begin to, instead of thinking that I know what's happening, explore what's happening right now as if I've never seen it before. Let it be weird. Let it be unusual. See the space around it. See the opportunities for different kind of relationship to the reality around you. So, any questions before we start? Okay, then we will begin. And I'm going to do the thing of doing the gong every 3 minutes or so